Hi guys, P here with another video. This time we're in the garage where it's a lot warmer than it was last time. Today we're going to be taking a look under the hood. Here you can see the hood. This is where I cut out a section and I riveted in the Poison Spider knockoff hood louvers. Take a look here. Here's the heart of the beast. This is the mighty 22R-E. Now this isn't the original engine that came in the truck. I blew that one up, and I know what you're thinking. How do you blow up a 22R-E? They're supposed to be indestructible. Well, they do have their weaknesses. Now, this is 85. This is the first year of the second iteration of the 22R-E. The first iteration had a double row timing chain. This iteration and all through to the end of the 22R-E had a single row timing chain. Now, that single row timing chain is known to stretch. So you have to replace it after every 100,000 miles or 160,000 Ks. This truck, when I got, had 225,000 Ks, which is about 150,000 miles. So hopefully someone was already in there doing something. I don't know what the last owner did, but he was definitely in there doing something. When I got it, there was a whole bunch of RTV slathered around the timing cover. Now, that's one way you can do it. You know, you should be using the gasket. If you use RTV, you know, you slather it on there, slap that cover on, you're guaranteed not to have links, but it squeezes out on the inside. It also squeezes out on the inside. Now, when I tore down the engine after I blew it up, I found a couple things. A, the oil pickup, it was covered in RTV, and there was little chunks of RTV in oil galleries as well. So what had happened is that I was on the highway, took an off ramp, threw a rod. When I tore it down, there was RTV in the actual connecting rod oil gallery. So that got hot, ejected itself from the block. I had to rebuild it. So I got this rebuilt. It's just a mild build, stock bottom end, everything like that, bored a little bit over. The only thing that was really done to it is that I put on steel timing chain guides as opposed to the factory plastic ones, because as the chain stretches, it can go and break those plastic ones, and if it continues to do that, then it'll wear its way through the cover and into the water jacket, and then you have a milkshake. So I got the metal ones there. It'll prevent it from working its way through the cover. The other thing that I did is I put in a 261 RV cam. The RV cam is used to get a little bit more torque down low. I figured if I was going to be crawling this, probably be a little bit better to have that low end torque. So those are the two things that I did to the engine. Otherwise, it's pretty much stock. There is a fuel pressure gauge there, and that's just because the electronics in the 80s, they didn't really read a lot. You can see that there's vacuum hoses everywhere, and that's because the electronics don't really control a lot in this vehicle. It's all still done by vacuum. So that gauge is just there so I can monitor different things, because the ECU is not going to tell me anything when it comes to this vehicle. So moving right along, I'll go through some of the other things that I've changed in the engine bay. Anything that's stock, I'm just going to kind of go by. So one of the things that you probably noticed here was all the connections of the battery, and you're probably wondering what's going on there. That looks like a little bit of overkill. Well, it's not really. As I mentioned in the last video, I have front and rear winches. So, you know, this lead, that's for the front winch. A couple other leads are for the rear winch. And then the other ones are the starter and the block negative. So they're all there. Yeah, they're big, but they have to be big for the current that's flowing through it. And if you notice, one of those leads for the rear goes right into this. Now this is a battery isolator. It does 500 amps continuous with 700 or 750 peak amps. That is used to isolate all the wires going down. I didn't want always the wires to be live going all the way down there, because there could be road debris, there could be something on the trail, something will go, hit that wire, nick it, cut it, break it, tear it, whatever it's going to do, and then you have, you know, a big, huge, thick cable delivering, you know, 400 or 500 amps, and that's going to cause a fire. So what happened here is this is basically a solenoid. I have a switch inside. When I activate the switch, it lets the power through to the rear winch. When I shut it off, it's off. So that's basically a battery isolator for the rear winch. Up here is another relay box. So the factory Toyota one is here, and you can see there's not really a lot going on there. This truck has about 8 to 10 fuses and probably about 3 or 4 relays from the factory because there's not a lot of electronics. But I went and added, fog lights, spotlights, rear and front crawler lights. So I needed to add a few more circuits. And this is where I kept everything. It looks somewhat like a factory box, and it holds all the relays and fuses for all the individual things. So there's, as I said, spotlights, fog lights, underlights. The brown one is actually a relay for the horn because this truck doesn't come with a relay for the horn. So you get a maximum of 5 amps to the horn. When I had to replace the horn, the only one that worked in here was a motorcycle horn. So now I have a relay. I can actually put proper horn in here so that people can actually hear me when I honk the horn. Those fuses are for the added circuits that I put in that go to the relays. So in addition to that, there's a hose back here with a little silver top on it. Now that's the vent hose for the front axle. There's a barb on the front axle, comes up through a hose and ends there, and that is a one-way valve to let air out but not let water and gunk in. Moving right along, you see a couple green lines here. Now that goes to the oil cooler. I have a sandwich plate that's in between the oil filter and the block. It has a thermostat switch inside it, so as soon as the oil warms up, it goes through these lines, goes through the bulkhead, and into the oil cooler. Now, why do I have an oil cooler? Normally you put those on engines that are going to be operating at high RPM, something more like, something they'll see at the track. Well, obviously this is not a track vehicle. However, I have added a double low in here in the transfer case. So before factory, I think the crawl ratio was something like 37-1, in and around there. Now this has somewhere in around of 226-1 crawl ratio. So that means that this engine can be, up there in the power band and not moving that quickly. And because it's not moving that quickly, you're not getting the air through the radiator, and the cooling isn't that effective. So I added an oil cooler here to help out with that. Remember, these engines from the factory, they don't have a lot of horsepower. They came with about 115 horsepower, and they have about 140 foot-pounds of torque. Now this probably has a little bit more because of the cam, but not a lot. It's still around the same. So I need to have that engine in the power band to get the power, any power out of it in order to crawl. Something else I upgraded was power steering cooler. Now this had a power steering cooler before, but it was just a metal line. So the rubber lines came off of the power steering unit, entered in the line. It was about 8 inches long, took a 180 and came back. So it was about 16 inches of a metal line, and that's all the cooling it had. So I've updated it with a finned oil cooler, and this is because I'm running a lot bigger tires. This truck came with about 29-inch tires originally, and this now has 39.5-inch tires. And they're not only taller, but they're a lot wider too. I think the factory ones were probably about 7 inches wide. These are about twice as wide. They're 16.5 inches wide. So that's a lot more tire to turn when you steer. So the fluid's going to get a lot hotter, and I got a cooler to keep it nice and cool. Additionally, there's a red line there. That's not to a stereo. I don't have a big boom box in here or anything like that. That's actually the upgraded alternator wire. As I said, there weren't a lot of fuses or relays in this truck, brand new, so there wasn't a lot of electrical demand. So therefore, the stock alternator was low. I don't know what it was. It was probably around 60 amps, somewhere around there. Because I now have winches and things that draw a lot of current when they're operating, this now has about 130 amp alternator. I don't know what it is. It's somewhere around there, 130, 135. So I need much bigger wiring. So this is actually power wire for an amplifier. It's 4 gauge, I believe, and it goes from the alternator to the battery, and that handles my charging needs. You can see here the corrugated pipe. That's actually the air intake pipe. That's actually the factory one. It used to come out of the box, but instead of going towards the rear of the vehicle, it used to come through the front of the vehicle, through the core support, and that's where the air entered the air box. I now have it going towards the rear of the vehicle, where it takes a 90, and then it goes through the fender. Once it goes through the fender, it actually goes up and through the snorkel. So air goes in at about hood level, comes down along a 90 into the engine bay, another 90 where it comes into that factory pipe, and then it takes another 90 and goes into the airbox. This is another area that I upgrade, the master cylinder. Now, this truck came with solid disc brakes up front and drums in the rear. Solid disc brakes, they're not even used anymore. They're used in the rear, but never in the front. So I've upgraded this truck to vented rotors up front, and I moved the brakes that were on the front to the rear. So this now has 4-wheel disc brakes. Each of the calipers are 4-piston. Originally, there were 4-piston on the front with solid rotors. Those are now on the back. And the front have vented rotors, also with 4-piston. So I needed something that moved a little bit more fluid. So this is off of an FZJ80 Land Cruiser. Those vehicles came with 4-wheel disc brakes, so it's proportioned properly. I didn't have to add a proportion valve or anything. And because it already has disc brakes, it had the volume that I needed as well. So this works perfectly. It was a direct bolt-on, and I didn't have to do anything else with regards to brakes. Now, if you see here, it also has a header. This is a pace setter header. It gives me a little bit more torque. They are long tube, and you can see there that the long tube, it's a 4-into-1 where it hits a collector, and then it goes underneath the truck as the pipe. That pipe down there is a 2-inch pipe. They don't have a lot of big exhausts on these vehicles, and they don't have a lot of horsepower, so they don't require a big pipe. So this header goes down 4-into-1. You can see here, there's the pipe that comes from the header, goes into a catalytic converter. Now this is a MagnaFlow catalytic converter. It's just a universal catalytic converter. It's not for this vehicle, but it works just great. Again, 2-inch. From there, you can see that it goes up and over the brace. So this is just a universal kit from Lyle's Stainless Exhaust. I got it from them. A couple elbows that I welded together. So it goes up, it goes over the brace, and then from there, it goes into the muffler. So this muffler is the equivalent muffler that would have been on here. This is a MagnaFlow muffler. Round muffler, that's what was on here to begin with. 6-inch, I believe, which is the same thing that was on here. So it's a factory style muffler that I put back on here. Fits really well. Now, from that muffler, it actually comes out and exits right in this wheel well. So that's the actually outlet. It doesn't go all the way to the rear, and that's because there's a winch back there. And I really don't need a hot exhaust passing past the shocks, passing past, a vent tube for the rear axle, wiring right by the electric motor for the winch. Instead, I just have it coming out here. Works really well, sounds really good. As I say, it's has all the components it had with the factory, catalytic converter, same size muffler, same size pipe. So it sounds very, very similar to the way it did in the factory. The only thing is that it has a header associated with it that may be a little bit louder. So that's it, guys. That's the engine bay and the exhaust, the intake, everything like that. That's what's been done on this vehicle. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see something else, let me know down in the comments. Or if you saw something in the engine bay that you have a question or a comment on why I did it that way or how I did it, glad to hear those. Anyways, see you next time with another video. Bye.